I'm going to show you guys how you can create a simple and easy RAG agent using LightRAG. So the first thing I want to cover is what is LightRAG, what are knowledge graphs, what are vector databases. If this kind of stuff bores you, then skip ahead to where we actually implement it. So in this workflow, I'm laying out what happens in LightRAG when we upload a document. So when we upload a document to LightRAG, it starts embedding this document into two separate databases that it automatically creates. The first one is a knowledge graph, and the second one is a vector database. Now, what is a knowledge graph? And so knowledge graph essentially is just entities and relationships. So each entity is a node. In this case, if we look at Tim Cook, the name is Tim Cook and the type is person, and this is all within a node. The labeled relationship, the edge, is CEO of. And then that connects to the node Apple. And then Apple has its labeled relationships, its edges of makes and based in. So when we ask an LLM, where is the company that makes iPhones based out of? It'll jump in here and see the node iPhone and then query its named relationships, which is makes, is a, and runs on. It sees makes, and then it jumps to the Apple node. And then the Apple node has a relationship or an edge called based in Silicon Valley. And then we get back Silicon Valley when the LLM finishes querying the knowledge graph. So we can really see how this is very powerful and complex, like enterprise systems and things like that. Now I want to talk about a little bit about vector databases. And so knowledge graph gets created by LightRAG and the vector database gets created by LightRAG as well. But what is a vector? So it is just a direction and a magnitude. And so here you see that the vector in this case is 3, 1. 3 is the x-axis and 1 is the y-axis. And in 3 dimension, this is 2-dimensional, but in 3-dimensional space, we have another value. So for example, it'd be 3, 1, 5. And in our vector databases, that is normally what it is. It's 3 dimensions. The most popular version of this is Postgres plus pgvector. And pgvector is just an extension to a Postgres database that allows the vector data type to exist. And so when we get a bunch of objects or a bunch of texts, a bunch of chunks, and we feed them to an embedding model, the embedding model is then going to make a bunch of vectors like we just talked about in 3-dimensional space. And it's going to assign these vectors based on a bunch of different algorithms like nearest neighbor and things like that. And then it'll create similarity between these vectors. And so if we were to look at this vector database graphically, we'll see that truck, car, and sedan all got ranked similar to one another. They all have similar vectors and they're on one side of the vector database. Whereas tomato and potato got scored on another side of the database. Now, we can really see how this kind of gets powerful when we stack them on top of each other like LightRAG does for us. Apple, if we only had a vector database, would probably get stored near tomato and potato. But we're not talking about the fruit, we're talking about the company and its relation to iPhones and Tim Cook and Silicon Valley and all that jazz. So now when we have both of these systems on top of each other, it gets very powerful in returning the correct information that you want. So now let's talk about what actually happens when we make these models and create these databases and then we query the agent. So our question will go into an LLM of your choice, and then that LLM is going to query the knowledge graph and the vector database. And then it's going to synthesize this data. And once it's done synthesizing this data for us, it's going to feed it back to the LLM, and then the LLM is going to give us our answer. And so that was a lot. I hope it was very helpful. Now let's jump into how to actually implement this. So the first thing you're going to need to do is download Docker for desktop. Go to their website, docker.com, and then go to download Docker desktop and pick whichever system you got. And then once you install that, we can then move on to actually implementing the system. I got Claude Code open right now in an Antigravity instance within a blank repository. And I'm just going to drop in this prompt that you can grab in the description. and it's just going to tell it, hey, set up LightRAG locally using Docker. Make sure you have Docker installed. And then it's going to ask you for your API keys. Make sure you provide those. And then it is going to create the Neo4j knowledge graph and the Postgres pgvector database for us. So let's run this now. And so you see that it's now asking me for my OpenAI API key. Just make sure you go to OpenAI, get your API key, and then place it in the other field. All right, so it finished and it made hundreds of files. And then it gave us two endpoints, one to the WebUI and another to the API documents. So let's click on the WebUI one. And so here is the document. So when you start uploading documents to embed them, you'll see them all here and their status. And you'll do so by the upload button. In the other tab, we got a knowledge graph. Right now it's empty. There's nothing in here. We haven't uploaded anything. But when we do, we will see those edges and nodes in here. And then retrieval is actually when you start talking to the agent, and it's actually going to start finding things from your knowledge graph and your Postgres database, vector database. And then the API here is actually how you can use this in other applications. You can use it in Claude Code. You can use it in anything. And this is how to actually query the model and update the model and get new things from the model. Let's now upload a document. In this case, I'm actually going to upload $100 million offers from Alex Hermosi. And we're going to first click on the upload button. And you can actually just drag and drop it. I'm going to do that. You see that it says file was successfully uploaded. It's 4 megabytes. Now it's going to start the embedding process. It's going to split everything up into chunks and embed it into our model. So you see here, it just created the new record and it's given a summary. The status is processing, gives the lengths and the chunks. It split it into 80 chunks. Now you can actually change this. I think by default, there isn't no smart context aware chunking. It's just like regimented by token size, if I'm not mistaken, but you can actually change that if you want later. And so here, if I jump over to pipeline, I can actually see the status of the chunking. So I was able to embed 8 out of 80, and then it's going to go through all the way into the very end, and then we're going to see our knowledge graph. While that embeds, here is the Docker image it created for LightRAG. And so you see that it's currently running, and then you can click stop, but don't do that. And so it's been chunking for a while, and it went through all 80 chunks. And now you see it actually is processing the entities we were talking about, those nodes and their edges, their relationships. So it found 643 entities and 540 relationships. So it finally completed, and you see now the status changed to completed. And when we jump over to the knowledge graph and we reload it, we're going to see all the entities that it came up with. So we have a lot of entities with relationships between one another. And if we were to hover over one right now, let's do Alex. If we go to Alex, it says the name is Alex, the type is person, and then these are its relationships. Scarcity book, acquisition.com, Layla, that's his wife, $5 million profit, $50,000 offer, entrepreneurship, goodwill, convergent thinking, divergent thinking, etc. And so now if we wanted to query this, we'll jump over to retrieval and let me zoom in. And I'm going to ask it, I believe this book talks about the value equation, so I'm going to ask it about that. What is the value equation? So it says the value equation is a framework created to help quantify the variables that contribute to the value of any offer. Okay, and then it says the essential components include dream outcome, perceived likelihood of achievement, perceived time delay, and effort required. This is exactly the value equation. And you'll see it even gives you the reference. It says 1. It's only because we uploaded one document. What would be better is if I were to had split up these PDFs into chapters, and then we can actually split by the chapter itself. So that's pretty much LightRAG in a nutshell. I can do another video next about an add-on, so to say, for LightRAG, which is called RAG Anything, and it actually helps you handle complex imagery, graphs, equations, things that LightRAG doesn't have the capability to handle right now. Just let me know in the comments.